Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I am delighted to be here. I want to begin by thanking my colleague and my friend, Councilmember Mary Cheh, and she is absolutely right. I did not know Mary Cheh before 4 years ago, right around this time when we came together to talk about how we would go through the general election, through the November election. And we have become not just colleagues, we've become friends over the last 4 years. And I have to tell you, I have the highest regard and respect for Mary Cheh. I think she's done an absolutely extraordinary job as the council member in this ward. Following on an extraordinary list of distinguished council members, beginning with Polly Shackleton, who I knew as a young professional. She was the person who really helped me move along a cause, a reform cause in the field of mental retardation. She was the person who did the legislation, was the champion for the legislation that changed the way of life for people with mental retardation and developmental disabilities in the city. And of course, Jim Nathanson, and then Kathy Patterson, who served for 12 years with distinction as the Ward 3 council member. And I want you to know that you have a real gem in Mary Cheh. She is a leader, she is committed, she's very smart, she works hard, and she does Ward 3 and the District of Columbia proud every day for the service that she gives. Thank you, Mary. I think she knows that she has become, in many respects, the go-to person for me. When there's a really tough issue, I pick up the phone and say, Mary, and then would you do the following? And she always says yes. As a matter of fact, that's how government operations and the environment became one committee. And that is, I asked Mary if she would take on the responsibility for government operations, and she said, I will do it under one condition, and that is if you let me have the environment also. And so she's taken that on, and I think she's done an extraordinary job in both of those areas. And again, you have an extraordinary leader on the council here. I want to recognize, too, my colleague, our at-large colleague. He doesn't like me to call him new, and I guess he really isn't new anymore. You're just finishing 2 years, at least in terms of your election, right, Michael? He is an at-large member who works extremely hard. He's taken on the Committee on Housing and Workforce Development, and I think has done a terrific job, Mr. Michael A. Brown. And we have a former colleague here, Vincent Orange, who served with distinction as the Ward 5 council member. And Mr. Suleiman Brown, who was a candidate for mayor during the recently completed Democratic primary. I also want to introduce two other people. First of all, my campaign chairman is here, who is a very long-time friend. She's a vice president of Amtrak. She served in the Clinton administration and has provided extraordinary service. She is a native Washingtonian, and that is my dear friend Lorraine Green. And the gentleman who served as campaign manager, who I twisted both of his arms up his back. He was very helpful to me in becoming the chair of the Council of the District of Columbia. I don't think he really wanted to do this, but I really appreciated the fact that he stepped up and did it. He set aside his own career for a few months in order to do that, and that is Ward 3 resident Adam Rubinson. And so I do want to hear from you all tonight. We've launched this week a series of town hall meetings across the city. We will have one of these meetings in every ward. We were in Ward 5 on Tuesday night, and I think we had, I don't know, around 750 people who came out. And it was a wonderful dialogue. There probably are some people in this room who were there on Tuesday night. And Lord knows why anybody would want to come back again to one of these things. But I want to thank you if you were there on Tuesday night. And obviously, we have a wonderful turnout here for tonight. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. The purpose of this is rather simple, but it's profoundly difficult to achieve. And that is, how do we get to the point where we work effectively together as a city, as 8 wards, because one of the things that was very clear to me during this campaign and the previous campaigns that I've run, and that is that we may live in different neighborhoods, but the reality is the issues are essentially the same, you know, from one neighborhood to the other, one ward to the other. So how do we bring to bear our collective energy, our collective wisdom, our collective experience, our collective intellect to be able to make this the kind of city that we want it to be? Now, one of the things that we need to recognize, and I want to recognize again Mary Chay's candor, and that was the realities that we live with in this city at this point. And one of those realities is that we are a city that is divided. And it seems to me we ought to all hopefully be able to figure out how we make a commitment to bring this city closer together. We obviously are geographically divided. We are economically divided. We are socially divided. And if one believes the polls that were done before the election and the way the election went, we are racially divided in this city. I'm not one who has subscribed to that, to be honest with you, in terms of us being racially divided. That's why I say that the onus is on me. I think that there are a lot of people who did not vote for me because they really don't know who I am. And people are not going to vote for you if they don't know who you are. We ran a campaign that was about 5 months, 6 months long. You know, I'd been the council chair, which means I was elected by the entire city. But you realize very quickly that while you may be in a city of 600,000 people, of 62 square miles, the fact of the matter is not everybody is paying attention every day to what's going on and to who you are. And even after a vigorous campaign, even after being in this ward on many occasions, I still think that there are a lot of people across this city who do not know who Vince Gray is. And so the purpose of getting out and talking to people is to help you better know who I am and hopefully better understand that what my values are and how important it is for me to see this city work effectively together. I think a lot of people who voted for me voted economics. There are people who, you know, who really feel like they have not advanced themselves. They are job seekers. They want to move themselves forward, and they felt like our campaign was more responsive to that. And then there are other people who felt like our campaign wasn't responsive to what was important to them. And I understand that. I accept that. And I look forward to working with you, you know, not just beginning tonight, but even before tonight, and in the weeks and the months ahead to be able to address that. One of the things that I know is incredibly important to people in the city is education. And let me tell you, for those who may have questions, I heartily support education reform. Now, the title, the rubric, if you will, is far more complex than just saying education reform, because it probably means something slightly different to everybody who talks about education reform. Actually, education reform began long before 2007 in the District of Columbia. With the advent of charter schools in the District of Columbia, that is education reform. We now have one of the most robust charter movements in the nation and certainly in the world. We have, and I was looking at some data yesterday, we have added another 1,600 students to charter schools in the District of Columbia, and we now have 29,600 students who are enrolled in charter schools in the District of Columbia. The advent of charter schools was around 1996, 1997. In the beginning, they had a handful of students. They had 2,000, 4,000, and then it started to mount in terms of the numbers of parents who were choosing to go to a different form of governance. A charter school is different because each school has its own governance approach. There is not a central governance model. There's no Board of Education. Each school governs itself. We have now 57 schools in the district. We have 99 campuses serving those schools. And as I indicated, almost 30,000 students who now are a part of charter schools. In 2007, I was proud, as the chairman of the Council of the District of Columbia, to move the mayor's legislation forward through the council to achieve reform in our traditional public education system. And by the way, I am a product of the public education system in the District of Columbia. I am a K through 12 graduate of the public schools. And yes, I think I got a good education. And yes, I understand that traditional public education truly had fallen upon hard times. Too many dropouts, too many kids being failed, too many parents frustrated, too many teachers not doing the job as effectively as they should, too many outcomes falling far short of where we think our children should be. So I was proud to move that through, very proud to move it through, and frankly have worked to do two things, and that is to support education reform in the District of Columbia and to do the best job we could of accountability, which is one of the two roles that the council has. We do two things. We legislate and we engage in oversight to assure accountability. And we have done the best job that we could, I think, to be able to achieve that. Now, we have had some interesting days, and I understand that. And that is the nature of reform. But I honestly don't believe that reform and collaboration are mutually exclusive. They don't have to be strange bedfellows. I think we can work effectively together in order to be able to achieve that. I don't know how many of you saw Bob McCartney's article in the Washington Post today, but that is exactly the point that was made. And I have followed somewhat closely what has gone on in Baltimore the last 3 years. And the superintendent of schools there has done, I think, a reasonably good job of working with the stakeholders to try to bring forward education reform, and the results are beginning to demonstrate themselves. Do I think that we've achieved positive results in the District of Columbia in the last 3 years? Absolutely. I think we are at a very different and better place than we were 3+ years ago when we launched this journey. And one of the reasons, frankly, is because we restructured public education in the District of Columbia to create a different approach. First of all, we took all the buildings and grounds out of the D.C. Public School and created an entirely new agency, the Office of Public Education Facilities Modernization, headed by Alan Liu, to address that. And I think Alan Liu has done a good job in addressing the physical plants in our schools. We took all the state functions out of the D.C. public schools because it was an inherent conflict of interest. We created a new organization altogether, the Office of the State Superintendent for Education, which has a budget of between $400 and $500 million, has the budget also for the charter schools, going through it, and then to the charter schools, which is another $400 million, and took those functions out of the D.C. public schools. We took all the legal functions out of the D.C. public schools, and we took all the information technology functions out of the D.C. public schools in order to create an agency that went from this to this, far more streamlined. I see Peggy Cooper-Capris, who served as the president of the Board of Education, applauding, and I'm sure you probably wish you had a much more streamlined organization to be able to provide oversight of. It is a very different organization, and we stripped away a lot of other things. We stripped away some of the rules in terms of dealing with people who are poor performers, substandard performers, so that if they didn't perform, they went out the door. And we stripped away the rules in terms of how you deal with the Central Operations Organization, so that if they didn't perform, they went out the door. It is a very different organization today, and one I think we can move forward with in order to achieve education reform in the district. But my platform went beyond that. And I have a track record on some of those issues, like early childhood education. I was the one who championed the legislation, and frankly, I'm pleased that Mary Chait joined with me. There were some days when I think she was ready to go beyond where I was on this issue. We said a couple of years ago, we're going to do something that is bold. We're going to create a seat in public education for every 3- and 4-year-old in the District of Columbia, and we're going to redefine when public education begins for children. And we passed the legislation to do that. We said that by 2014, we would have a seat for every 3- and 4-year-old in the city, in a D.C. public school, in a charter school, or a community-based organization. And I'm pleased to stand here today and say that It didn't take us until 2014. We did it 4 years early. As of September 30, we have become the first city in the nation to have a seat for every 3- and 4-year-old in an organized early childhood education program. And we're going to continue on that path because I believe that we need a birth to 24 continuum. I want to work on opening the door to create universal access, and there will be parents who will have to participate financially in some of this, to infant and toddler programs. And frankly, for those children who come from socially and economically challenged situations, it will provide an opportunity for them to get the kind of early start that they otherwise wouldn't. And frankly, we'll have a chance to work with their very young parents to help them be different parents than they otherwise would be. And we know for some of our kids, the meal that they get in school, for some of them, is the only meal they get during the day. So why not open the door to these kids when they're even younger? I believe that we've got to restore career and technical education to our schools, so that young people who don't want to go on to college then or at any point will be able to leave the 12th grade with a marketable skill so that they can go to work rather than go into unemployment. And frankly, yes, we need to reform special education. We have one of the most challenged special education systems in the nation. We spent last year on kids in private schools, because we couldn't accommodate them in our public education system, $166 million. Another, this year, $93 million in transportation and almost $10 million in attorney's fees. You cannot tell me that we can't do better financially than spending $250 million on putting kids into private placements and transporting them every day to school. And yes, I am proud to have been part of creating the first ever, we were the last jurisdiction in America, the first ever community college in the District of Columbia. We have launched it. It is now 14 months old. We have almost 2,500 students enrolled. We have now renovated the back of school. They now have gone in there to be able to provide classes there. 801 North Capitol Street will be the headquarters, and P.R. Harris in Ward 8, where they will provide an opportunity for a 2-year degree, workforce development education, and continuing education services that will create yet another option in the District of Columbia. Yes, a birth through 24 continuum of services is not just rhetoric. It is possible, and that's what we need to do for the people of the District of Columbia. So, the rest of my platform, I'd invite you to go to the website and take a look at it. But we know we've got to get people back working again. We have a double-digit unemployment rate in this city. In some areas, like Ward 8, 30%. Where I live in Ward 7, 19%. And we have an incredible disconnect. We have this strange phenomenon of there being more jobs in the city today than there were 4 years ago, and a higher level of unemployment. And the answer to that is obvious, that the jobs that exist, the people who need jobs, don't have the skill levels that are required to be able to qualify for those jobs. And the government has to step up more aggressively, more assertively, and provide opportunities to be able to do that through career and technical education, through the community college, and frankly, a reformed Department of Employment Services that once and for all sees itself as the lead agency to provide training for adults in the District of Columbia. Public safety. I'm as proud as you are to see that homicides are down in the city. We are at a 4-decades low in homicides. There are other areas of crime that we're up, but we're going to work hard to reduce that as well. And one of the ways to do that is to get more of our police officers out into our neighborhoods, out into our streets, and working to help them build relationships with their communities. And yes, we need to figure out, and we got some ideas on that, how we get more of our first responders living in the District of Columbia. We only have 19% of our police officers who live in the city and less than 12% of our firefighters who live in the District of Columbia. Why is it that we don't introduce those curricula, those training opportunities in high school to 11th and 12th graders? Obviously, they live in the city. We ought to give them an orientation to those opportunities and begin to open the door so that we have an indigenous first responder system in the District of Columbia. And then finally, everybody knows that we've got fiscal challenges at this stage. We have a $175 million problem that is facing us. And frankly, some of the things I've talked about, we don't need money to do them. It's just a question of how you deploy the resources you have. I was pleased to work with the mayor over the last 2 weeks. He issued a mayor's order that we worked together on to be able to achieve, beginning to look at this issue. We have stopped spending as of this past Monday, and we will be working now for the next several weeks to put together proposals that will address the $175 million problem. $100 million in reduced revenue estimates and $75 million in overspending in some of our agencies, and that will have to be brought under control. Frankly, though there's people in here who know this, the reserves are gone. We had $1.5 billion in 2007. That money is gone. What's left in the reserves at this stage will cover our bond escrow fund, which is a commitment we have to make when we issue bonds to build buildings, to renovate buildings. We have to have money sitting there to show the bond purchases that we can make the payments. And the rest of it is a requirement that was imposed upon us by the Congress, and that is to keep a contingency reserve fund. And I hope, by the way, when we talk about the Congress, I hope we can come together as a city and say once and for all that we really want to make a statement to this nation that we ought to be able to have the same right to self-determination as everybody else in the nation. I think we've managed ourselves well. You know, there are jurisdictions, there's one to the north, the name of which begins with an M, that has $1 billion budget deficit. We've addressed each of our problems as we've gone along, and frankly, the moment of truth has come. We don't have any more reserves to invest in our budget, and it's going to be difficult this year, and it's going to be difficult next year. But you know what? Nobody has talked about taking Maryland's statehood away from them. Nobody has talked about taking Virginia's statehood away from them. Nobody has talked about taking Utah's statehood away from them. So I'm going to ask you to join with me on that issue, to try to make the case for why the District of Columbia should be accorded the opportunity to approve our own budget, the opportunity to approve our own legislation, the opportunity to have a vote in Congress, and ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, and while it may sound like pie in the sky at this point, we ought to be fighting to become the 51st state in the United States of America. I saw some of the statehood activists stand up. I see Mr. Cassell, who's been a fighter for years. I see Michael D. Brown, who's our shadow senator, working on this. And I hope we get into a room where routinely, no matter who's in that room, everybody will stand up when we talk about this and say, you know what? We might not agree on everything, but we sure can agree that we ought to be able to make the decisions about our own futures in the District of Columbia. And so I ask you to join with me. As I said when I started this statement, the onus is on me. The onus is on me to help you know who I am. Hopefully you will know better who I am as a result of this and the discussion tonight. And I ask you to work with me as we go forward in the District of Columbia, because we have huge challenges, but we have an even greater potential to be, I think, the greatest city in the world and the greatest state in the United States of America. Thank you all very much, and let's open it up for questions. All right, Wanda.
Good evening.
Before we start, I think there are microphones. Where are the microphones out there? Okay.
Testing 1, 2.
Oh, I didn't know.
Is it one or two?
They're coming. There's three, actually.
Okay. There'll be three.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh. My name is Wanda Oates, and I'm a retired D.C. public school teacher. I was also educated in the District of Columbia Public Schools, K through 12. Graduated from GW with a master's degree, Mr. Chairman, and presumptive mayor. I am concerned, well, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on holding hearings for our young people and sitting there all day long, listening to their concerns and acting upon them. I am concerned about education also. I am concerned that President Obama does not think that his children are worthy of decent public school. There is one school that I know that is not only on par with Sidwell Friends, but above Sidwell Friends, and that's Wilson Senior High School. I know because I taught there for 2 years, and I just retired in June. Now, my concern is relative to the leadership at Wilson. We've had a number of outstanding teachers pushed out of Wilson, and I got a letter from one of my colleagues today, Mr. Eric Martell, who served at Wilson for 25 years, teaching AP classes with a great deal of success. We also had Dr. Art Siebens, who is now retired, who was also pushed out of Wilson Senior High School. These were outstanding teachers, pushed out by first an administration that does not even live in the District of Columbia. Art Siebens lives in the District of Columbia, and so does Eric Martell. And I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah. All right. I am very concerned about the willy-nilly way in which things are done in terms of giving principals carte blanche to do whatever it is they want to do without any repercussion. And I want to say to you, Mr. Mayor, that when you become mayor of the District of Columbia, that you will allow input not only from the community, but teachers and students in terms of who is going to teach them in the future. Thank you very much.
I think for those who have read my education paper, and I invite you to do that, there are 4 principles. One is to have to continue with a strongly empowered chancellor to run our schools. Secondly was the Birth Through 24 continuum that I talked about. Thirdly was to open the door for the stakeholders more than frankly has existed in the last 3 years to be involved in how our schools operate in the District of Columbia. And then the 4th principle was around the financial management, because we've had some challenges, and we see them once again in this $175 million problem that we have. That $25 to $35 million of that problem is associated with special education in our D.C. public schools. But yes, the point of opening the door more to our stakeholders is one that I heartily support. Let me make something perfectly clear. I don't have any intention of micromanaging schools. People ask me about a principal or this one or that one. That's what the chancellor is for. The chancellor is there to run the schools. But one of the things that is important to me is to be able to make sure that the tools that we're using are tools that have been fairly crafted and fairly implemented. We have this new impact evaluation system in our schools, which is new. It's a step in the right direction. But we've got to be able to rigorously and scientifically validate the effectiveness of those tools. I happen to know Dr. Siebens. I happen to know Dr. Siebens quite well. He was an extraordinary science teacher, Is he here? Oh, there he is right there. Yeah, there he is right there. And to this day, I don't understand why Dr. Siebens ceased to be worthy of being able to teach at Woodrow Wilson High School. I asked the questions, and we let it go after that because I don't run individual schools. The same thing with Eric Martell. Eric Martell is an accomplished teacher at Wilson High School. I know him. He's been down to testify any number of times before the Council of the District of Columbia. And I know that there was another teacher also who was equally highly regarded as the other two gentlemen that I mentioned, who also is no longer at Wilson High School. The issue is that I'm not going to go in and be the principal of a high school. I'm not going to be the counselor. I'm not going to be the chancellor. I'm not going to be any one of those things. But we are going to have transparency in how things are done. We're going to have if parents and others in a school community ask questions, they deserve answers because there's nothing more important than a school community. That's why education is called public education, because the public is involved in the education of our children. We made some compromises in terms of shifting how governance worked in this city in order to get rid of some of the layers and the things that had stymied progress in the past. But that was not a license in a stretch of anybody's imagination to cut people out. People who are parents, the community is as good as it gets when people care enough about their community school to be involved in it. And again, with the teachers that were mentioned, I don't understand why they were no longer worthy of being able to work there. We raised the questions, but at the end of the day, I didn't try to become the principal or the assistant superintendent or the chief academic officer or the chancellor in the public schools. I still don't understand why they were let go. And I think it's important for communities and parents and others who are involved with the school to raise those questions. And frankly, when people have evaluations, the results of those evaluations ought to be respected. And I know in the case of Dr. Siebens, frankly, I saw his evaluations, and they were absolutely sterling. And I saw something more than his evaluations. I saw student after student after student come down from Wilson High School and talk about how much they revered that man and what he had done for them. His advanced placement courses and the other work he had done with those students. You could see it because they came down to my youth hearings and talked about it. This wasn't any concocted thing. It wasn't made up. These were genuine sentiments being expressed by kids who loved and respected this man. And these are the kind of teachers that we need to keep in public education in the District of Columbia.
So genuine. They don't.
Chairman and Presumptive Mayor Gray, I want to thank you for all you've done for me. You may not remember me. I worked with you as a trainee in HRC many years ago, and I want to thank you for what you've done for me.
Why don't you, Janet? Why don't you tell folks who you are? She said her name is Janet. Her name is Janet Pupper. And I worked with Janet my very first professional job. And you know how proud I am to stand here and see someone who would have been perceived as needing to be dependent upon society for the rest of her life, be able to be in a meeting like this and stand up and speak the way she, you know how good that feels? And I haven't seen Janet for years. I haven't talked to her for years. And thank God for allowing me the memory to remember who Janet is.
Excuse me. Here we are. I was encouraged to hear you say that you were going to look carefully at the budgets. And it's very important that you do, because there's been, I think, under Mr. Fenty, a considerable amount of misallocation. For example, they're getting set to spend $5.5 million on Chevy Chase Park in this district when it's so obvious that other things are needed. Also, they've treated the capital budget as sort of free money. Who cares? And this is coming out of the capital budget, so we don't have to worry about it. But I would urge you, sir, to look at the allocations and to make sensible reallocations. And I think the fact that people to the east of Rock Creek Park were more in your favor is probably because they understand that there's been a misallocation.
I appreciate your comments about that, and you're absolutely right about the budget, the capital budget. Not a lot of people pay attention to it, and not a lot of people understand it. But we have a line item in the budget every year that's called debt service. And the debt service line is for us to be able to pay for the capital investments that we make. Now, I will hardly say that many of the capital investments we've made have been incredibly important because our schools look a whole lot better than they did 3.5 years ago. I was proud to join with Mr. Fenty and my colleague Kwame Brown to be able to do the legislation that said we are going to make the investments in our schools to modernize our schools. And that created back in 2006 a commitment of $200 million a year to fix up our schools. Now, frankly, that sounds like a lot of money, but it is not a lot of money because one high school costs about $100 million to rebuild. So, you know, an elementary school or middle school will probably cost $40 to $60 million. So you can see how long it will take in order for us to get to everybody and every school. But I think a lot of progress has been made, and that's because we did have a capital budget. Now, one of the things I did in legislation, and I'm proud of it, was, and this goes directly to the lady's issue, and that is we put a cap on the debt. And that is we put a 12% cap on the debt that we can amass in the city. What does that mean? That when you look at the overall budget, all right, the operating budget, no more than 12% of that budget can be for capital debt. Go look at the federal budget if you want to see something. Go look at how much debt, what the percentages of debt. I think it's up to about 40% now for debt service alone. And they question whether we should have statehood or not. So we have a debt cap of 12%. We're not quite at it yet. We're at about 10+%. And we have projects in the pipeline that will move forward and hopefully we'll be able to stay under that. I see my colleague has joined us also, who will be, I call him the presumptive council chair, Council Member at Large Kwame Brown. Kwame, thank you for coming out tonight. And we've been joined by the gentleman who also has stood for re-election. I guess he's the presumptive Ward 5 council member. We had a great meeting in his ward the other night in Ward 5. Councilmember Harry Thomas, Jr. Thank you for being here. So, yeah, we're going to look at every dollar in this budget at this point, and the mayor and I are going to work together to make this happen. We worked together on the mayor's order. That was a stopgap measure to stop spending while over the next several weeks we put together a plan. That plan will come before the council, and yes, we are going to have a public hearing on it so that the public can weigh in on how you view what is being proposed. And frankly, what often happens is we hear some great ideas in these public hearings, and that plan may look different after the public hearing. We hope to bring it forward by late November, early December, but we bought ourselves the time we need because we have turned the faucet off on spending for a lot of things in this government so that we can craft a plan that will bring us in balance this fiscal year. Can't hear you, Gretchen.
Hello, hello? You can hear me? This better? Okay, this one's working at least. We have the room divided into 4 sections and in the back. So what we're going to do is take turns with each section, have you ask the questions that way. please raise your hand and we'll recognize you and come around to each section. Thanks.
Well, since I have the mic, can I go? My name is Susan Haight, and I'm head of the Federation of Friends for the DC Public Library. And I attended your meeting in Ward 5 on Tuesday night. And my question is whether you will make the libraries as much a priority as former administrations. The operating budget for the library is down 20% since 2008. We're on a capital program, but we want to make sure that there's a baseline budget and that we won't be cut anymore, because hours have been cut, staff's been cut, and resources have been cut. And given your platform, it feels the library would be important. Thank you.
I appreciate the question, and I won't do something as disingenuous as to stand up and say, no matter what you ask me, no, that's not going to be cut. Because I can't make that statement at this stage. But I also recognize that the libraries have been cut significantly. I was in Cleveland Park on Saturday when they honored 5 former employees of Cleveland Park who left the employee roles because of reduction in force as a result of budget problems. And I realize that the libraries at this stage are really kind of down to the, not only the bone, but the bone marrow in terms of its budget. In the meantime, I think you know also we have made a very significant investment in improving the condition of our libraries. The Tinley Library is slated to be completed in January of 2011. We just reopened the Walther Daniel Library, and the Anacostia and Benning libraries have now been completed. In fact, the Benning Library has been renamed in memory of Dorothy Height, a real icon and a real fighter for the rights of women and racial minorities in this country. We have the Francis Gregory Library that's being rebuilt. And also in Ward 7, there's the Deanwood Community Center, which was recently completed. If you haven't seen it, I invite you to go there because there's no facility like it in this area. It's a recreation center with a gym. It's an aquatic center. It's a child care center, a senior center, and a public library all rolled into a 63,000 square foot building. So there's obviously a commitment to improving the capital a commitment through the capital budget to improving the condition, the physical condition of our libraries. What this means, however, in terms of the near term, as far as the operating budget of the library, I can't say at this point. One of the things that I do respect, and I just joined with some others, and that is the fantastic job that Jenny Cooper has done in running our libraries in the District of Columbia, and the fantastic job that John Hill and the Board of Trustees have done in managing the library. We gave them their own procurement authority so that they wouldn't be stymied by bureaucracy, and that's why these libraries have moved so quickly, because they have their own procurement authority and they've exercised it quite responsibly. I don't know what the budget will look like this year when we finish, or next year for the libraries, but I would invite you to come down and make the case before the council when we have the hearing. But I will say this, it's something that I am sensitive to and would recognize 2 things: the important contribution to libraries, the important contribution that the libraries make in the city, and secondly, the fact that those budgets have been reduced tremendously thus far, and there's certainly no fat. Fat would be an overstatement to suggest the library budget has any fat in it.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Mayor. I respect and honor everything you have said and done, but I stand as a senior. My name is Reverend Evelyn Williams. I'm a retired person from the federal government. I resigned 32 years ago and started my own work. And I live in a senior citizen building. And I just want to bring to your attention that a lot of the seniors are being forgotten, tossed aside. They live in some deplorable conditions. They live in buildings that are dressed up outside, but on the inside, things are being torn down, and they are afraid. And they have spent their lifetime doing what they're supposed to do, but now they're retired, and some of them are their last days. And they're afraid to speak out. They're afraid to say anything. And I don't feel like as a senior, if you've lived your life, and we all are going to get old, that we should be living the best of our lives for the rest of our days. And we should be living in conditions that we are pleased with. And a lot of people here have mothers and fathers and grandparents that are in senior buildings. And I say it's senior. Okay, but the rent is constantly going up 6%, and I don't think that's right for seniors to take all their little bit of retirement that they get, or some are on disability, some are on Social Security. All they can do is pay rent, and there's nothing left for a lot of them to live on. Maybe a lot of them they can afford it, but from I live over here in Warren Street, Tricia Terrace, but all the way across the city, there are a lot of senior citizens buildings, and people are living in deplorable conditions, and people don't even say too much about it, and people are they're not getting the best treatment. They're not living the best that they can. And I don't think it would be paid extra down in rent. You know, and some of them have studies, eyes to pay. They have definitely a lot for this. They need to be able to make choices. And I don't think that seniors with disability and non-disability should be paying the more rent.
Yeah.
Some of them can't afford it. Rent's going up now 6%. And so there's nothing left for them to really live on. So I'm just bringing what can be done to be able to ease the minds and emotions of the seniors that are living in these places? Because I'm quite sure that families don't want to see them doing this. It's a strain. I say it's a burden on them. And a lot of the landlords, they don't think they're doing enough.
Mr. Gray.
Yeah. I don't think there's a person in this room that would take exception to what you've just said. And I'm proud to have been a part of a council that has really exercised a number of different tools, not only for seniors, but also for affordable housing in general. Rent control, for example, will come up for reauthorization this year. And before this council adjourns at the end of December, we not only are going to address the issue of rent control, but the council is going to reauthorize rent control, and for the first time in the history of this city, we're going to reauthorize it probably as permanent rather than having to do it every 5 years or 10 years. It'll be permanent rent control in the city. Now, that having been said, we've also done some studies that show us that we've lost probably 10 to 20,000 units over the last 15 to 20 years that building units subject to rent control. We had 100,000 at one point, and we're now down to somewhere between 80 and 90,000 units that are subject to rent control. So we're going to look at that. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that affordable housing is an easy problem to solve. But we probably have more tools in this city than others. The council just did inclusionary zoning. How many of you are familiar with inclusionary zoning in here? That's great. What it based, for those of you who don't know, what it essentially says is that if you get the opportunity to build a new building that has 10 or more units, and most of ours do, of course, 8% of those units have to be affordable at various levels, at the 80% level, 60% level, and 30% level. And the quid pro quo, if you will, is that you make those affordable, and we will give you density bonuses, which says that if you could only, for sake of argument, build 500 units, you can build more units than that as a result of the density bonus. So you get something, the city gets something in terms of preserving affordable housing. On the other hand, we have 26,000 people on a waiting list for affordable housing in the District of Columbia. But we do have some opportunities coming up. We've got Walter Reed, which is now going to be built out over the next several years. And I, among many others, have been an advocate for more affordable housing. We've got Poplar Point. We've got other areas of the city that are going to be built out that will give us a chance to be able to do that. Is that going to solve the rent issue that you just cited? The answer is no. It'll solve it for some, but it won't solve it for others. When you raise the issue about, about the conditions under which people live and the role of family members, let me just cite something to you. I have an older brother. He was almost like a second parent, a third parent, actually, to me. And my brother had a stroke 2 years ago, and he's now markedly incapacitated. And he is in a facility here in the city. And frankly, it's a good one. It's here in Ward 3, and I appreciate it. I was there today. And one of the things that is important is, wherever possible, when family members are involved in the care of their loved one, the quality of care improves, because people then know that you are watching and you're paying attention to what they do. And frankly, we've got some really good nursing homes in this nation, and we got some really bad ones also that should be shut down. The other thing that I'll mention is I've been a real advocate for, and I want to work on this as mayor, for aging in place programs, where people have an opportunity to stay right where they are. I think Palisades might have been the first chapter of the Aging in Place program. We now have 6 chapters in the District of Columbia across the city. And I want to see more of them develop, bringing people together around the notion that people have common needs, and those needs may be able to be met as a result of coming together in this way. Somebody may own a house, their spouse may have died, and what's the possibility of 2 or 3 or 4 other folks who have similar interests, similar needs, coming to live together, which will obviate the need for some of these facilities that don't run very well in the first place. And frankly, it's another form of affordable housing to me, because let's say the mortgage has been paid off or is very low, it makes the housing component of it much more affordable than would be the case in a government-run program or a government-subsidized program. And there is no way that we should have any contractors who are working on, like with the Wilson project or anything else, and have the kind of statistics that you just cited. Now let me tell you what we're going to do. The council tried to put money into the budget to hire more compliance officers for the First Source Agreement. Their role was to be able to go out and measure what was being done with these projects. We're going to step up compliance on the First Source Agreement. 51% of the new hires on any contracts that are let through the District of Columbia are to be district residents, and we know that that's not the case. And frankly, my approach is going to be, if you don't have 51% of those hires, we're going to take that contract away from you, and you will never get another contract in the District of Columbia. And I can almost assure you that it won't take long to make an example out of somebody. And once we do that once or twice, you'll be surprised how compliant people become as a result of that. It is absolutely ridiculous to come in here in a room like this and recognize the tens of millions of dollars that we're spending on these contracts, and then to see that our people can't get jobs in the district. What's worse is, you really got me going now. 70% of the jobs in the District of Columbia are filled by people who do not live in the District of Columbia. What that means is that those dollars go out the door every day, and because we don't have self-determination in the District of Columbia, we cannot tax income at its source, so the dollars go to Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Texas, or wherever people live, and they never come back in the District of Columbia unless those people choose to spend those dollars here. Those are our dollars. Those are our tax dollars, and they should be used to employ people in the District of Columbia, and in a Gray administration, that is exactly what we're going to work to do.
Okay, we're going to take a question from this section, but I just wanted to remind everyone.
Oh, before we go from that, we've got a major project coming up, and that is the work that's going to be done on the west side of the St. Elizabeth's campus for the Department of Homeland Security. There will be 14,000 permanent jobs that will come there as a result of the Department of Homeland Security. There will be 22,000 construction jobs that will be coming there. I realize that's the federal government, but frankly, the contractors who will be involved in that are people who do business with the District of Columbia. And if they won't work with us, they will be contractors who used to do business with the District of Columbia.
We're going to try to get to as many people as we can tonight. I'm positive, because of the size of the crowd, that we will not be able to get to everyone. So we're going to go around, continue to go around in sections. The one thing that I was going to tell you is that when you first arrived, you were given a questionnaire. Please feel free to fill that questionnaire out when you leave, and also write any questions on there that we were not able to answer.
Yeah, if we don't get to all the questions, we're going to put them up on we're going to put the answers on the website. Is that right, Gretchen?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Chuck Ludlow from Cleveland Park. Thank you for talking about a commuter tax. We are essentially the only jurisdiction in the world that cannot tax the income of non-residents.
That's right.
Essentially, I mean, every state can do it. Mm-hmm. Every country can do it. And people say that we can't overturn the ban because there are 4 senators from Maryland and Virginia and 19 House members from Maryland and Virginia. I worked on the Hill off and on for 40 years. It is impossible for 4 senators and 19 House members to block the president and you and Eleanor Norton and the council. If you really say, we are absolutely, this is $1 billion we are losing. Every single issue in this room is affected by the fact that we are a colony on this subject. And the question I have is whether you will go to the president, who I don't see as doing anything for the district, and you will go to Norton, and you will go to our champions in the House and Senate, and to the council, and say, it is time, irrespective of what we do on the vote. Obviously, if we had the vote, we could probably get this easily. But before we get the vote, as we still fight for the vote, are we going to try to go after that revenue? It is not a tax increase on these commuters. They get a credit on their income tax in Maryland and Virginia. The Republicans should not oppose it. And President Obama owes it to us.
Well, I concur with everything you said. And let me answer your first question. Will I do that? Absolutely. But I don't want to go up there and turn around and see nobody behind me, okay? You know what I mean? I want to go up there and say, Senator, I want you to look out your window, okay? You see all those people out there? Those people are angry as heck. And we deserve the same fair treatment as anybody else. And by the way, you know, you live in Maryland or you live in Virginia, and a lot of us are going to come over there when your time for re-election comes up and talk to people over there and see how they feel about the way we've been treated. But I can't do it by myself. I will go to meetings and people will be very polite to me. Yes, you make a good point, Gray. Excellent point. You know, we've heard people talk about that before. And you know what's going to happen as soon as I go out the door? It'd be like, who's going to make the jump shot of the piece of paper into the trash can? It only will change when we become outraged enough to stand up and fight for ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. That's how this country was founded. This country was founded on resistance to taxation without representation, and that is precisely what we have in the nation's capital. There isn't one nation's capital in the world that doesn't have a vote in its national legislative body in the free world. There isn't one. And we send our sons and our daughters over to Baghdad and, you know, Timbuktu and Kabul and all other places to fight for democracy for somebody else. And when they come home, if they come back to a second-class citizenship in the District of Columbia. When are we going to stand up and say enough is enough, ladies and gentlemen? And for me, enough is enough. I'm willing to wage the battle, but I cannot do it by myself, okay? I have got to have you with me. Now, will y'all stand up and fight with me for our self-determination in this city? And no, I did not ask that gentleman to ask that question, okay?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Allison Kokoros. I'm principal of the Carlos Rosario International Public Charter School. And I just wanted to, I have a short comment. I just wanted to thank you for your strong support of charter schools in the District of Columbia. And also for your strong support of adult education and career and technical education. It is so essential, especially at these times, and I salute you for your support and your deep knowledge in these areas. It has really been evident over the years, and I thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you very much.
Proud to have helped elect Vince Gray, Mazel Tov. Two things. I mean, all your stands I really agree with, but I wish, one, you would go into more detail about your call for civil disobedience. I've been a proud member of DC Vote for years, and I think that's really important, what you've just said. Second of all, is a little thing, but it really affects the businessmen and women in Upper Connecticut. And at 6:30, we're used to not having to put coins anymore. And downtown, first of all, who carries that many coins? A quarter for 7 minutes, that's torture. I can't do the credit card, I'm too old. I know we need revenue. I'd rather you increase my taxes and then once a year I just write you a check than have to deal with those fakakta meters.
I agree. How about this, Aviva, that we have spaces, we have parking meters that are designated for people from Maryland and Virginia. We collect all the quarters, and then we stand right there and give them a ticket as soon as the clock runs out. No, you're absolutely right. The council actually resisted an increase that was proposed in this budget. It would have reduced it to a quarter for every 5 minutes, supposedly to generate another $3.2 million. We said no, we weren't going to do that, and we found money from somewhere else in order to be able to achieve that. So your point is well taken. I think it's now up to 10 o'clock. I hear it everywhere I go. Frankly, when we have better revenue opportunities, it's one of the first things I would love to get rid of. It's hard right now because we're in such a difficult situation. But we've created a nightmare for some of our small businesses because people now don't go there because they either don't want to pay the parking fees or they don't want to get a ticket, or both in many instances. Put all those quarters in and you come back, you know, on the third trip to the meter and find out you were a minute late and you wind up getting a ticket. So your point is well taken. Now, I met with some DC Vote folks yesterday, and we're putting together a plan now as to what's going to happen next. And, you know, let's be honest with ourselves. We better pay close attention to these congressional elections that are coming up, because if we lose the House, it's going to be a very difficult time for the District of Columbia based on some of what I've read. How many of y'all read that article in the City paper recently? I would invite you to go read it. I think it was last Thursday's City paper about what would happen if the Democrats lose control of the House of Representatives, and it is not a pretty picture. And frankly, it's another reason why we need to stand up and fight for ourselves. I'm willing to do whatever. Doesn't matter to me. But you know what? Let's say I go to jail. So what? So there'll be a story in the paper the first time it happens. It won't even be written up, you know, by the next time it happens. I don't know, maybe some of these electronic media might interview me, at the second and third time it happens. But at the end of the day, so what? It only changes when you have collective outrage, when you have enough people who come together and say enough is enough and we're not going to take it anymore. You know, if we had 500 people today who were engaging in civil, where are they going to put us? What are they going to do with us? There's not enough jails to hold us. And you know what? That would be a story, wouldn't it? So.
Thank you.
By the way, I want to recognize, I don't know where he went. Yeah, there he is. I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by our colleague, Phil Mendelson, who is a dear friend of mine. We have some truly hard-working council members, but I don't think there's anybody that outworks Phil down there. And by the way, Phil got more votes than anybody else did in the last election in September. And he's serious too, man. I tell you, when I see him coming, he always has this list, you know. And he was the day before yesterday you were in my office, Phil? And he got another list, right? Well,
Mr. Gray,
yes,
someone recently said at a town hall meeting she was tired of defending Obama. I'm tired of defending this city. From a tax assessor who literally told me if I wanted to live in this Ritchie neighborhood, I had to pay, to my building permits being delayed 4 months because the permit office isn't on computers. If we want to bring jobs and revenue to the city, we need computers in the permit office. We need to not run residents to Bethesda and McLean who would otherwise move to this city and make it the vibrant, wonderful place we know it to be.
That's an excellent point. One of the things that I committed myself in this transition, is I love the sign when you go into West Virginia. I don't know if you've been to West Virginia. The sign simply says "Open for Business." It's a profound message. And today's, I think, and Barbara Lang will tell you this, I think we're rated 51st, 51 out of 51, right, in terms of our business-friendly practices in the city. I want to look at all of that during the transition. I think some of this, frankly, we have such a Byzantine regulatory system scheme in the city that I want to look at that during the transition. And by the way, if you'd like to be a part of that, we're welcome to have you on the transition team to give you a chance to have some input into that, okay? Go onto our website, buildonecity.com and .org. Is it .org? No, it's .org. Is it .org? Really? I'm so glad. .org feels good. It feels like you're a nonprofit, right? Buildonecity.org, and you'll see a transition button, and just input your data and indicate what you want to do. And bring your solutions with you. All right.
Over here. Here you go.
Oh, okay.
Peggy?
Hi, my name is Peggy Cooper Kafritz, and I have lived, and thank you. Thank you very much. I've lived from Adams Morgan to Wesley Heights to Palisades to Georgetown. A lot of places in the city for a very long time.
We gotta get you a permanent place to live. You keep moving around.
Well, that's unfortunately next on my personal agenda. But anyway, so I deeply love this place. I have known Vincent Gray since I was a teenager. He was a leader on the campus. I went to George Washington University, undergraduate school and law school. There was not a lot of anger from the 1960s and early 70s African-American leadership at George Washington University. We achieved a lot, but this was one reason. In addition, when he left George Washington University with high job offers staring him in the face, he went to work with severely retarded citizens of our society. And I'm using the word advisedly because that's what it was called then. He did a brilliant job, and he has never left until he went to work with homeless teenagers at Covenant House. He has always, and when I saw his programs, they always had white kids and black kids and old white people and old black people. I have never, ever seen him engage in anything that's all this or all that, okay? Now, just a moment. I'm not asking a question right now, but I think it's really important for everyone to hear my experience with him. And I say that because I went to the website, not the website, but I was online looking at a lot of the comments after the election, and they were really hateful. And I just want to assure everyone that you absolutely could not be in better hands. I have white friends and black friends and white relatives. You could not be in better hands. And we have, this is my question, we have an illiteracy rate primarily due to poverty and an intractably bad school system for decades. We have an adult illiteracy rate of 37%. 37% of our adult colleagues are illiterate. An overwhelming majority of them live in Ward 8, and we don't even know the kind of poverty and horribleness that they face. So I would like to know what kind of focus we finally will place on that intractable problem. Thank you. And thank you, ma'am.
Well, I think it has to be a two-pronged attack. I think it has to be directly focused on those people who now experience the problem, and they are the 25, 30, 35-year-olds who fall within that 37% that you talked about, Peggy. And, you know, we've got we need to invest in adult literacy programs. We've got a number of programs. The council stopped them from being cut in the last budget. They were being cut down to the absolute minimum of what was required to continue to get federal funding, and we put all the money back in those programs, which isn't enough. I think there's no magic bullet answer to this, but our community college has to be one of the ways in which we address that we bring together the Department of Employment Services. We use our career and technical education programs in our secondary schools, the Department of Employment Services, and the community college as ways to begin to attack this. And I think one of the ways you deal with it also is we've got to make learning relevant to what it means as an outcome for people, and that is the learning has to be connected to a job opportunity. You know, the gentleman that talked about the, you know, having a job as an electrical worker earlier, there's certain academic requirements that are associated with that. And if you can connect that learning to the fact that the person is going to have a particular kind of job at the end of the day, it's going to be far more relevant. You know, I used to, when I was working, I appreciate you bringing it, we used to, when working with people with mental retardation, they used to use play money to help people to learn how to count. Well, you know what? We started using real money. You know, people pay a lot more attention when there's real money on the table. And people learned a lot faster if they had the capacity to be able to learn. So one, on that end of it. The other end of it is, and this is the longer term solution, and that is, this is why I place so much emphasis on early childhood education. You don't often get politicians, and I guess I'm a politician. I haven't spent a lot of years doing this. I've only been in political life for not even 6 full years yet. But you don't get political leaders who have the desire, if you will, to invest in early childhood education. Why? Because there's no immediate payoff, and people are often saying, what have you done for me lately? Well, frankly, we have chosen to invest in that, and I think we're going to, over time, have fewer kids with developmental delays. We're going to have fewer kids who have literacy problems because we will have gotten them early enough to be able to make a difference in their lives. You described it as intractable, and it is seemingly intractable, especially when somebody gets to 30 years old and, you know, may be functionally illiterate, may not be able to read enough to do a resume. And I think we're going to be substantially challenged with that population. I think we need to bring to bear all the tools that we have, which are the 4 areas that I just mentioned, but I think we need to work even more concertedly on the front end of this, getting these kids as early as we possibly can. And frankly, again, to go back to the issue with jobs, there is no way that we should stand here and let all of this work be done in Ward 8 on the St. Elizabeth's campus and watch people standing on the outside not being able to get jobs there. 22,000 jobs? Come on, we can do better than that. Before we go to the next question, I want to acknowledge that we have somebody who is absolutely preeminent on the financial front, and I was delighted to be endorsed by her, and that, of course, is Alice Rivlin. Alice. And by the way, I think I can mention this publicly. We haven't started to put together any transition efforts, but recognizing our financial challenges, we reached out to Alice and said, Alice, will you work with us on how we address some of this? And she said, absolutely, yes. And joining her in that endeavor is somebody who I talked to this afternoon, a name I think you all will recognize, who has done some work on the financial front in the District of Columbia, and he agreed heartily to do that, and that is former Mayor Anthony Williams.
Okay, here we are over,
First of all, thank you very much for coming tonight and for hosting this. It's very important to have this conversation. My question's about education. What has not been mentioned this evening is that statistically we have in the last 10 years been the worst public school system in the nation. And that hasn't been mentioned this evening. And my question to you is, I admire Mayor Fenty for going out on a limb and for creating a chancellor's position and for making some tough choices. One, are you going to keep the chancellor's position? I don't care if it's Michelle Rhee or not, but are you going to keep the chancellor's position? And two, should you keep that position, what two top areas do you hope to see the chancellor to tackle in terms of our educational system?
Well, the answer is unequivocally yes, that there will be a chancellor. It will be somebody who is fully empowered to be able to run our schools. You know, that's why I have said in these two town hall meetings that people will come to me with issues about this or that or the other. I'm not going to become a substitute for the chancellor. I want somebody who's going to have been delegated the authority to be able to run our schools, and I want to support that person in running our schools. Now, there's more than two things that I think have to be worked on. That's why we have a cadre of people. First of all, special education reform has got to be at the top of our list. And frankly, one of the reasons for that is because I think, unlike all the other areas, there's potential for dollars to be able to be saved and reinvested in the rest of our education as we are financially challenged. I won't go over all the numbers that I cited earlier, so that one is going to be at the top of my list. Also, in terms of career and technical education, we need to start to be able to imbue our secondary schools with more diversity in that area, because it will stem dropout rates. If you go back and look at when dropout rates started to really increase in the city, it was when we, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, started to systematically eliminate career and technical and vocational education programs from our schools. And there were kids who could not find themselves. Some of them weren't very good, but that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It means that you look at what you're doing and try to improve those. What happened was we closed the schools and we closed the programs. I'm not either suggesting that we open a bunch of new vocational schools. That's not my point. I think we should develop new curricula and have them in every one of our high schools so that we avoid the social stigma that often has been associated with being in a vocational education program. But those are two of my top pieces. The other is to begin to connect the dots. One of the positions that is often not talked about is the Deputy Mayor for Education. And I believe a lot more could be done with that position in terms of being the person who connects what's going on between the D.C. public schools, the charter schools, early childhood education, the University of the District of Columbia, the community college, all of which, crafted right, can be perceived as a continuum for our kids. And frankly, the TAG programs too, the tuition assistance grant programs, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. They have never, in the last almost 4 years, they've never been tied together in any kind of effective way. So I want to bring about that coordination because I think our children will benefit from being able to see a bigger picture, and I think the parents will benefit as well. So that's more than two, but I think those things can be done simultaneously.
Here we are over here, Chairman Gray.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Darnetta Tyus, and I am a proud resident of the District of Columbia, having relocated from Chicago, and a resident of the 3rd Ward, or Ward 3. I wanted to make a comment about the, having done lots of work with economic development, about the hiring and contracting. Large companies smile when the operative language of our change says a percentage of new hires, because the truth is that large companies come to the table with a team already assembled. So if I have a team of 100 people on a contract and I come to you and I'm only going to hire 6 people, then what you get with those compliance numbers is actually 3 people for hire. So as we look at how to make compliance really, really relevant in the district, we need to make sure that we have some teeth behind that operative language that says a percentage of new hires, because major companies come to the table with their team already assembled.
I agree with you. And I'll tell you another thing that gets done also, and that is what people will do when they have multiple projects. They will take the district residents off of an existing project and move them over to the new project, and they are technically new hires, and then the old jobs get backfilled with people who don't live in the District of Columbia, and the net increase is nothing. So there's some flaws in the first source law at this stage, and those loopholes need to be closed. And frankly, again, you know, given how the District of Columbia is treated in so many instances, I'm committed to closing those loopholes. And so what are they going to do with us? I mean, what are they going to do to us? I don't know what the consequences are other than to maybe get more jobs for more people in the District of Columbia.
Good evening. Over here.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Kim Worthy, and I am a resident of Washington, D.C. I grew up here, and now I'm a teacher here. And when I was growing up in Washington, D.C., I had many peer pressures like everyone else, and one of them was choosing to do well, between doing well in school and risk being called acting white or talking white, or being accepted by my peers. Today, 36 years later, that's still a stigma that many of the African American children are faced with today. And I noticed during the campaign that there were lots of comments made about Mayor Fenty making bike lanes and dog parks, insinuating that he was doing more for the white residents of Washington, D.C. versus the African-American constituents. And it became an issue in one of my classes. Every week we have current events, and right before the primaries, one of the students brought in an article, and he shared this article about Chairman Gray. And we were doing a fishbowl discussion, and in this discussion, he was expressing his support for you, for mayor, and how he was against Mayor Fenty because Mayor Fenty was for the white people and not for the black people. And he started citing reasons why he felt this way. And one was the bike lane and the dog park. And I said, well, okay, well, what's so wrong with having a bike lane? What's so wrong with riding a bicycle? And he had issues with it and saying that that's what white people do. And so I just think that we have to be more responsible with the messages that we send to our children here, because at a time when African Americans are have the highest rate of deaths because of heart attacks and so on and so forth, we might want to ride a bike to work or something like that. We might want to cut down our expenses by riding a bike, and we might want to be more eco-friendly by riding a bike. But not only that, other issues, you might want a dog, yeah. Other issues were brought up as well as far as education reform. And that a lot of the reform that has been made also has been geared towards helping white people and not helping, I'm talking about Mayor Fenty's and Michelle Rhee's reforms. And so I hope going forward that education reform is not synonymous with helping white people, and that the hard decisions that have to be made to improve the school system that has been deplorable, not for everyone, obviously, but for many of the citizens of Washington, D.C., it has not been up to par. And I know that I was not allowed to go to D.C. public schools in my neighborhood because they were not up to par, and I had to go to private schools. And so I hope that going forward, the hard decisions are still going to be made. Teachers are going to be held accountable, and principals, everyone is held accountable, and it's not synonymous with being white.
Thank you. Well, actually, I think the way you address the bike lane issues, we start putting bike lanes all across the city. I think we've got to have other transportation modalities. Automobiles are not going to preserve. They're not going to be able to sustain us over the long haul for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the impact on the environment. And frankly, I don't know whether people all across the city are not want dog parks or not. But I think the important issue is to understand what people want in their communities and then try to be responsive to that. I mean, we have every ward in the District of Columbia has people who has dogs. At least I think so anyway. So, and education reform is not just for a certain group of people in the District of Columbia. It is for everybody. It should be for every one of our children. And that, I don't think it was ever intended to be that. I've never heard Mayor Fenty or anybody else say that it was intended for a particular group of people. But we're going to make sure that people see themselves in education reform more than has been the case in the last several years, so that people feel a part of where we're going and not feel left out. We're going to take one more question, and that will be it for the evening.
Here we are.
Hello, Mr. Gray. I was at your Ward 5 town hall meeting.
Yeah, you got written
Tuesday.
up in the paper too, didn't you?
Yes.
You got a lot of. She got a lot of play. You're 13 years old, right?
Yes. And there I was talking about all the changes that were brought to our school, Hardy Middle School, from our new principals that no one wanted, and all these changes and schedule mess-ups and everything that have brought the school into turmoil, and how the school is just getting worse and worse by day. So today I'd like to ask you, will you please help us with all these to reverse these changes that have been brought to our school? My school was one of the best middle school, one of the best middle schools in the city. It made AYP for 10 years straight. We need someone to help us out. Otherwise, the school is going to be a disaster. And I would also like to invite you to my school, and I'd be your personal tour guide, so you can come and see. You can come and see the kid that doesn't have a second period, so he wanders the halls because he doesn't have a class to go to. You can come and see this one stairwell that the 3/4 of the school has to share. You can come and see the worthless period we have in before lunch class, where we're supposed to just sit in the auditorium and we're supposed to read, but it never happens. You can come and see our 15 to 20 minute lunch periods that we have now. You can come and see all this stuff that has been going on to our school. I'd like you to come and see it so you can find better ways to help us out, and we can get Hardy Middle School back to where it was before, with Mr. Pope being a great school.
I'll tell you one thing, somebody should feel good about this student learning in our schools, right? I will say what I said the other night, and that is, first of all, I've followed this situation with Hardy School now for almost a year. I have no idea why Patrick Pope was taken out of that school. It's a puzzle to me. He is arguably one of the most effective principals that we have. You're absolutely right about Hardy having met adequate yearly progress, AYP, for every year in the last 10 years. It is the only school in the District of Columbia to have done that. He supposedly is planning a school that I don't think has a prayer of seeing the light of day, because we just don't have the money to create another arts, oriented school. So I will come and visit. And I want to say what I said the other night, and that is, I'm not going to try to become the principal of Hardy. I'm not going to try to become the chief academic officer. I'm not going to try to become the chancellor. But I am going to be one of the chief accountability officers in the District of Columbia, and that is when things get done, there needs to be reasons why. I want to thank you all very much for coming out tonight. We have 6 more town hall meetings. For those of you who would like to come on out for 6. And it's great to see so many people who care deeply about our District of Columbia. I want to work with you, and I'm excited about the opportunity to do that. Thank you all very much, and good night.
Business partner.